non-alcoholic vodka this time. I'm changing things up for this video. So sit your ass down, come on in, and Uncle George will yap and spit some riz at the camera, as the cool kids like to say, to break down why the 70s were the best decade for film. Imagine that every 3 months a movie drops that doesn't just entertain you, it changes the way you argue with your friends, the way you measure your old man, the way you look at the ocean. That was the 1970s, and well, those films stay the same age while I keep getting older. I mean, today I just doom scroll past pastel posters in the 7th reboot of a brand I loved in middle school, while I goon for the 3rd time to a goon artist on Twitter that definitely does not use AI. But back then, walking out of The Godfather or Taxi Driver or The French Connection or The Wrath of Aguirre, my pupils would have been so wide they would have swallowed the parking lot. I'm projecting, of course, because I was born in the late 90s. Yeah, I'm officially hitting Unk status. But just stay with me through the paranoia of a true story about how typing almost toppled a president, stay through the horror for the only jump scare in this video, and stay through the end for 3 takeaways you can use to impress your friends and the art host at the next function you go to. I want to show you how this decade of cultural vertigo created films that invented your favorite prestige dramas and, well, created the landscape that we take for granted today. I have to do a quick little lore dump, if you will, about the 60s. Yeah, that's right. I'm gonna make a fan wiki about this. You see, by the middle of the 60s, the old studio felt like a casino at dawn, and well, it was deflating faster than a bouncy castle with a heroin addiction. The chips were gone, the band was tired, and the carpet smelled like, well, when I keep giving my friend his 3rd tall boy of the day, and then he yaks all over the toilet. Like, god damn it, Jack, you're always yakking in that fucking whatever. The carpet smelled. The big roadshow epics and musicals kept arriving with price tags that made accountants sweat. Cleopatra had already scared the horses, Hello Dolly and Dr. Dolittle were huge and shiny, but oddly hollow. Meanwhile, the audience had migrated to living rooms, television ate ritual, suburbs ate downtown places. Weekly admissions fell, and well, even the exits started shaking in their little booties. People were still buying tickets, but it just wasn't the same. They were boomers with long hair and draft numbers, and nowadays I call them delusional cosplayers. The control system was melting. The Hays Code, that once policed kisses and skirts, had become a punchline, and it is actually kind of similar to the current culture wars over goon bait in our movies and games, but let's not talk about that. You see, in '68, the ratings alphabet arrived, and suddenly filmmakers could show adult life without pretending it was a Disney ride. The legal and economic ground had shifted too, because, well, they made Fortunate Son and All Along the Watchtower to a real thing. Yes, they predicted Call of Duty Black Ops 1. The old vertical monopoly had crackled years earlier, and the studio lots no longer owned every link in the chain. Conglomerates began buying studios as if they were fashion bureaus or fashion houses. Gulf and Western took Paramount, Kenny took Warner, and Transamerica took United Artists, and the new owners did not care about the backlot myths. They cared about return on capital, and they were willing to try anything that reached the youth market. And yes, that's right, time is a flat fucking circle. We've been using the same tropes and there's been nothing new under the sun. Now, if you would consult the graph and consume your slop and then consume the next product, we can move on. But that means taste was changing in the bloodstream. College film societies were screening Bergman and Kurosawa and Godard, and French New Wave grammar seeped into American editing rooms. Handheld cameras and zoom lenses and Nagra recorders made location shooting cheap and fast. Movie criticism turned into a contact sport. Andrew Sarris argued for the director as author. Pauline Kael argued that passion beats theory. Those arguments did not stay on the page. They became the new meta. They were the new update. They entered the boardrooms and late night phone calls, and a generation of film school kids at USC and UCLA and NYU and AFI studied all of this like scripture and then walked onto the sets with heads full of Renoir and Hawks. Essentially, the generation of fanboys got to do it and run it back how they wanted to for the first time in a long time. And you had so many films just drawing the chalk line on the floor. You had Bonnie and Clyde in '67, The Graduate in '67 too, funny enough. And then you had Easy Rider in '69. Yes, laugh, it's the funny number. I just got out of a 6-year fucking coma, guys. Each one said youth culture wasn't just a subplot, it is the market. Each one used new tools in older European movies in a way that felt rude and modern. Juvenile, but in an endearing and fresh way. Executives who had been greenlighting glossy spectacles and wanted their own Wizard of Oz or their own 50s black and white that you could now use in public domain, they said, oh, fuck that. They wanted speed, they wanted sex, they wanted violence, and they wanted irony, and they wanted that contemporary music they just wanted to meth slam it. Enter the players who would become lore. You had Robert Evans at Paramount, taste forward and fearless. John Calley at Warner, literary but pragmatic and knew how to play the system. You had Arthur Krim and United Artists, famous for trusting producers and directors. Soon, Alan Ladd Jr. at Fox would write the kind of yes that changes history, and on the other side of the table, BBS Productions, Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider and Peter Bogdanovich, yep, that Bog, we know what we're talking about here, proved that small budgets and cultural heat could move mountains. The agent system learned to package talent into movies that felt like events. The director went from employee to, well, the quarterback of the film set. And that shift is the start of New Hollywood, not a club, a working condition. Director-led rather than star-led, youth-facing rather than middle-aged facing, location rather than backlot, and ambiguity rather than this sort of tight moral arithmetic. Sex and language and violence treated as weather rather than scandal. Endings allowed to land on doubt or leave you feeling a little emotionally drained. Budgets kept sane so executives could grant freedom and still sleep at night, but the directors had just enough wiggle room to do cocaine and blow because, again, this was the 70s. Actually, wait, no, they were using glue until the mid-80s. Anyways, the rope would tighten later, and for a while it stayed loose. And so, if you want a tight phrase to summarize it, just call it New Hollywood. It's what gave the visionaries room to breathe for this decade coming into the 70s. New Hollywood didn't just change who held the camera, it flipped the myth and how you're supposed to read into it. Cops and robbers were no longer bedtime fables, they were no longer the Americana of the night slays the dragon. It was America getting a pretty brutal reality shock. My case in point, Godfather 1 and 2. You have an actor, Marlon Brando, who no one wants to work with anymore. You have a director that keeps bombing and flopping, and, well, he's in what we call director jail. And then you have a writer who just wanted to sell out and write slop. Coppola takes Mario Puzo's pulpy mob novel and turns it into high art. Francis Ford Coppola turns a pot boiler into family scripture. You watch your son choose duty, then you watch the duty eat the son. Boardrooms, baptisms, business meetings, all staged like altars. The shock is not that gangsters act like executives, the shock is that the executives are the real gangsters. They act like them. Michael Corleone's arc is America's arc, a clean-cut war hero dragged into corruption because the system is built on corruption. He doesn't just inherit the family business, he becomes the business. The genius is, audiences rooted for him even as he turned monstrous. That is why those films feel very modern every year you rewatch them, or say every time a frat guy has his hinge date over and he takes the laser pointer out and explains it.
Ooh, are you guys watching The Godfather?
The Godfather.
I've never seen it.
Oh my God, you've never seen The Godfather? This movie is a rich blend of Coppola's aesthetic genius and a triumph to Robert Evans and the architecture of the 70s studio system.
Without The Godfather, prestige dramas don't exist. No Sopranos, no Breaking Bad, every morally gray anti-hero owes a debt to Coppola's Michael, unironically making him the godfather of literally me protagonists. Then comes Taxi Driver. Scorsese turns New York into a fever dream. Neon, grime, porn theaters, garbage strikes, and at the center, Travis Bickle, Vietnam vet, insomniac, alienated loner. His diary voiceovers sound like half the Reddit posts you wish you'd never read.
You talking to me?
Isn't bravado, it's psychosis. He's narrating his descent into the violence while the city eats itself. And here's the kicker. Audiences saw him and recognized their own streets, their own neighborhoods, and their own slice of Americana. America wasn't full of heroes, it was full of ticking time bombs. Scariest monster of the 70s wasn't a shark or a demon, it was a man with nothing to lose. So take the French Connection. It puts you in a car that should not fit under an elevated train and then tells you the hero's an addict whose drug is control. Friedkin shoots like a documentarian, edits like a thief, and leaves you with the truth that the police procedurals usually hide. The hunter can be just as dangerous as the prey. Mean Streets baptizes small-time hoods in neon and Catholic guilt. Scorsese makes consequence feel like a drumbeat that follows you down the block. Friendship, debt, faith, all braided into one anxious heartbeat. The camera jitters because, well, the soul does.
He doesn't understand, John. You know, just a kid who needs to be helped.
Answer me!
What do you want from me?
Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon are a 1-2 punch about institutions that grind honest people down. In Serpico, the uniform does not protect the good cop from the bad culture, and in Dog Day Afternoon, the crowd turns into a botched bank job into a street pageant and watches the system quietly swallow everyone involved. Both films feel like New York writing a letter to itself. A very fucking uncomfortable letter. And then slide in The Long Goodbye, Altman's private eye movie that treats classic noir as a funhouse mirror. Philip Marlowe wanders through a LA run by property, not honor. The joke lands because it really is a joke. The code that used to guide detectives has expired and now money writes the new rules, which is wow. Ain't that a tale as old as fucking time? And keep in mind, we are a reflection of the history that bleeds into the culture. History gives the mood first. After assassinations, Vietnam, Watergate, and a president who recorded himself into oblivion.
Never profited from public service. I've earned every cent. And in all of my years of public life,
the 70s woke up with that hangover that felt like a philosophy class. And from this is where you get films like Chinatown and The Parallax View, the latter being a corporate machine that manufactures assassins, and while the former really being about, sometimes you're just way too deep in that conspiracy, even if it comes down to your city's lifeblood. Or look at All the President's Men, how they make tying suspense and journalism into action because the stakes are the Republic. And again, going back to Chinatown, you have Los Angeles as Eden with a broken pipe and a family secret, which is another way of saying America, but specific. And you have these procedurals that look into the human condition, surveillance, intimacy, and, well, this is the ethos. And it was so real that your Tarantinos and your Nolans and your Ari Asters, they all now take it for granted. And because of all these bad vibes, or the bad juju as the millennials like to call it, well, you had a certain haunted energy. Faith was wobbling, medicine was miraculous, but also frightening because, well, chemotherapy came from fucking mustard gas. It doesn't get more scary than that. And cities felt unsafe, and you had the lead gas and the asbestos everywhere, and these were the rise of the serial killers, which I did touch upon tangentially in my last video, but to go back into it, the suburbs felt unreal, and or took all that free-floating dread and built a cathedral of screams with craft so sober that even non-believers leaned forward, and they were in for a treat because it wasn't just intergenerational fucking trauma or a very ham-fisted psychosis metaphor. So we could plant the flag with The Exorcist. It's not scary because the demon is vulgar, it's scary because Friedkin shoots it like a courtroom drama about the soul. Every choice is classical, locked off frames, winter light, a sound mix that makes radiology feel like ritual. And the shock is that belief and doubt get equal screen time. The priests are not supermen, they're just dudes on the job. And the mother's not punished for freedom, she is punished by chaos. And that is the decade speaking in a complete sentence. then pull the camera out of the cathedral and dump it into the sunburn, where humans are treated like literal slaughterhouse puppets or grunts at the Vietnam War. And that is with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is also one of Bill Burr's favorite horror movies, by the way.
Or something, you know, it was more of a thriller, and again, it was the atmosphere of that film and the way it kind of leads you into the horror and the kind of situation that you're in was brilliant. I grew up in Oklahoma and that's shot in Texas, but I related to the kind of landscape and how hot that movie, you feel how hot it is. You feel how just disgustingly sweaty, and you could almost smell that house. That dinner scene, the long table with all those people, you can almost smell how awful it is. But how Tobe Hooper made something so visceral and
you got the whole mob ties and how they couldn't shower or dress for a while. That's also why Trent Reznor sampled it for Downward Spiral when he was in between quick death matches with John Romero. The famous dinner scene is not just gory, it's unnerving, it's hysterical, and the laughter is arguably the worst part. That is what the 70s knew. When systems fail, the families keep going, which can be the scariest truth in America. And frankly, some could argue we need a little bit of that in the 2020s. And then slide to Halloween. Look, I'm a little biased towards John Carpenter because he's the fucking man, and well, The Thing is one of my favorite movies. And I'll say this, if Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock was horror movies learning how to have sound, this is like when movies had fucking color, boy. I wish I was a boomer so I could be in a theater full of smoke and teenage pregnancy and casual racism and just see Jamie Lee Curtis and her Nepo baby ass just scream her head off. Carpenter is the order where Hooper is chaos, though, and you get the precision shots, the long takes, and these very clever first-person shots that can kind of drag out this very cool minimalism. The camera becomes a mind of its own, and the mask becomes a moving blank as you see a boogeyman that comes out to Middle America, or technically Pasadena, because that's where they filmed it. The power move here is negative space, hence why they call him the Shade, or sometimes misheard as the Shape. You fear the doorway because nothing is in it, but you clearly know what's going to happen in the next 30 seconds. Or do you? You fear the doorway because nothing is in it. You fear the lawn because it is empty. The suburban street is a diorama. Jamie Lee Curtis's character, Laurie Strode, is a worker on a night shift. The final girl is not a sermon. She has attention, focus, breath control, and stubborn will. People love to argue about what the film says about sex and female empowerment, but really it's closer to a machine for noticing. It notices patterns, it notices sounds, it notices you starting to believe that every house in your block might have a locked room, and maybe that slightly weird kid that grew up in your neighborhood wasn't just slightly weird. This is also where comedies stop asking for permission and just come at you with a prying bar. I mean, look at Blazing Saddles, or we should actually start with Altman's MASH. I mean, it opens the decade with surgeons cracking jokes while blood hits the floor, which isn't cruelty, it's just the way things are for them. And then you have Mel Brooks, again, coming back to Blazing Saddles, where he just shits on the Western gloriously.
What did you expect? Welcome, Sonny. Make yourself at home. Marry my daughter. You've got to remember that these are just simple farmers. These are people of the land. The common clay of the New West. You know. Morons.
And then rebuilds it into Young Frankenstein, a perfect parody that loves what it mocks. And then you have Annie Hall, which turns romance into a running argument with time and memory and your own interior monologue, which is why the jokes feel like therapy sessions that actually help. And I think that's why Woody Allen has a very timeless feel to him with some of his movies. And funny enough, actually, I was a big fan of Woody Allen until I watched his movies. Hal Ashby makes satire tender in Being There, where a blank man becomes a prophet because the television needs one, and Across the Atlantic, Monty Python proves that, well, biblical seriousness can coexist with coconut horses, First in Holy Grail, then Life of Brian, which remains the smartest argument for laughing at power without hating people. And so, under the hood, you have two engines that are humming. The rating system finally allows adult language and sex so writers can tell the truth. And then you have counterculture stand-up flowing straight into the film. Think Richard Pryor's Voltage and National Lampoon, where Chevy Chase became Homer or Peter before The Simpsons or Family Guy. And then you have that chaos reaching Kentucky Fried Movie, and a breath later, you have Airplane at the Devil's Door. I swear to God this is not vodka. I'm actually drinking water to throw you off for this because, well, I've grown up, I've come of age, which actually segues into my next sponsorship. No, I'm kidding. I'm talking about American fucking Graffiti. It was made by this little indie director that made that weird Flash Gordon knockoff. Forgot the name. It kind of had a name like mine, but nah, whatever.
And I want you to get out of this office right now.
I'm sorry, Zeb.
No way.
You brought
No way.
You brought it on yourself.
I don't want you here.
So
Out.
sorry, George. I didn't think it would go like this.
Out.
Ted, I got your voucher.
Out!
Anyways, with American Graffiti, one night, one town, a jukebox becomes the narrator, and the cars gleam like promises that are already fading. Every needle drop is a memory device, and the trick here is simple and devastating. You watch the kids just circling joy while the camera quietly timestamps the end of an era. It's kind of like how people that are like in their mid-20s now romanticize 2016 or 2018. It's nostalgia used like a scalpel, not like a cinematic universe. Then you got The Last Picture Show, which is kind of the yin to American Graffiti's yang. A black and white is a moral weather report, a Texas Main Street that feels like a photograph curling at the edges. Sex arrives without sermon, and friendship fractures under boredom and pride. The closing of the theater is not a flourish, it's a diagnosis. Community shrinks when the shared screen goes dark. And then you have Paper Moon that takes the road movie and puts a kid at the wheel at the con. Depression landscape, itinerant hustle, two people who discover that a talent for lying can be kind of love. The film is light on its feet and ruthless about money, which is another way of saying it's peak America. And well, you got the movies that are about people coming home from the Vietnam War. You got Deer Hunter, which makes the war a wound that reopens at the dinner table. You got Coming Home, which is about love, care, and disability without that patronizing tone of the 50s and 60s. You got the Fire Festival movies, Apocalypse fucking Now, and it's the most expensive spiritual crisis ever filmed. Too many year-long expedition that was just supposed to be 2 months of principal photography, and a river voyage that ends with empire madness and shaking hands. Of course, transition that into Gimme Shelter, which watches the end of the 60s in real time. That's kind of how it feels like to be born before the year 2005 these days. Hearts and Minds forces audiences to hear voices they would rather ignore. And then you got A Clockwork Orange. You got Stanley Kubrick at the top of his A-game. Arguably, I like this more than The Shining, but hey, it's called engagement bait. Stay with me now. We're in the middle of a recession. Anyways, Clockwork Orange is a pop art menace staple to an ethics seminar. Solaris treats memory like a haunted planet, and Westworld invents the robot theme park cautionary tale. You got Close Encounters, which gives awe back to the big screen, and also a very modern picture of family fracture. And then you have Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is, oh boy, look at that, the real horror is Cold War paranoia, and more casual racism. See, it always circles back to that. And then, of course, Texas Chainsaw Massacre inspired a certain British director to, make a corporate conspiracy just disguised as, well, a monster chamber piece, and we call that Alien. I was going to scream about it, but there's space between me and the camera, so you wouldn't be able to hear it. It's a corporate memo that reads Expendable, which is the real climax of the movie. So you have Mad Max, which is, well, it's just Mel Gibson just acting as himself, and if you ever looked at Mel Gibson's voicemail to his ex-wife, you'll understand why Max was mad.
Fucking bitch on heat, and if you get by a pack of it'll be your fault. Alright?
You got the 1-2 punch of the fucking blockbusters. I'm going to start with Jaws. In 1975, it invents the coordinated summer event pretty much. You got the television spots and the wide release and a 2-note theme that follows you to the beach. It took what was going to be set on the Jersey Shore, which would have been funny, and it creates a certain pacing where you barely see the monster, and it's always going to have a couple lines done. And then that indie director I mentioned earlier, who kind of played fuck games with the unions and then shot some stuff in Van Nuys warehouses like he was a Brazzers producer. He kind of was inspired by Kurosawa and Proto Weeb shit and Flash Gordon. And he made this little thing. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It was kind of a big deal. Was one of the few directors at the time to get the full merchandising rights and be able to build the entire vertical pipeline and, you know, vertical integration where he could do it all himself. I mean, it's where you get Industrial Light and Magic, it's where you got THX Sound, and also it's where you get Pixar. No, I'm not kidding you. Pixar was his pet project before he sold it to Steve Jobs. And it's really weird because Jobs was so smart, yet he did some of the dumbest fucking things ever, man. I'm just getting off track now, though. Anyways, merchandising, capitalism, yada yada yada. Just put it in a comment that I said something really deep about Star Wars that hasn't been said in Mr. Plinkett review or a bunch of fucking culture war fucking Why the Last Jedi is too woke shit that we've had for the last 8 to 10 years. And then, of course, you got blaxploitation, which couldn't happen today because people would say it's forced diversity, and, well, fuck them. You got Shaft, and Superfly, and Dolomite, and Foxy Brown, and you got these cool black creators finally getting to say what they want, and they get to be just as schlocky and sloppy as their white counterparts. You have the LA Rebellion at UCLA making a quieter revolution. Charles Burnett's Killer of Sheep looks at the everyday black life and refuses to sensationalize it. Well, he had to walk so Spike Lee could run on and on about how he should have gotten casted for a Marvel movie. And I'm not kidding you, he did come to my college and he was very jealous of the MCU, but try to hide it. It's a story for a different time. You also had women, I know, right? Women in film, women in comedy, fucking insane. Well, they direct through the walls. You had Elaine May gives the Heartbreak Kid and Mikey and Nikki, two cold-eyed portraits of charm and damage. You had Barbara Loden's Wanda and a branch of independent realism that still flowers from that. Joan Micklin Silver and Claudia Weil enlarged in that map. And you also have midnight movies which create new citizens of the weird fucking film circuit.
Could you give us some of your political beliefs?
Kill everyone now. Condone first-degree murder. Advocate cannibalism. Eat shit. Filth are my politics. Filth is my life. Take whatever you like.
Yes.
John Waters, who, by the way, if you just want a light, like, throwback Disney style, like, family comedy, check out Pink Flamingo. It's made on a small budget.
Animal rights activists always say to me, how could you kill a chicken for a movie? Well, I eat chicken, and I know the chicken didn't land on my plate from a heart attack. We bought the chicken from a farmer who advertised freshly killed chicken. I think we made the chicken's life better. Got to be in a movie, got fucked, and then right after filming the next take, the cast ate the chicken.
Oh, Rocky Horror 2 is really great, especially on a first date. It's become a live ritual. Pyramid scheme known as AFI's Master School of Production. One good thing came from that, and yes, I am talking about Eraserhead with David Lynch. It's a rite of passage that smells like radiator steam, and then you have El Topo that turns a late night screening into a goddamn sermon. And then you have the Steadicam, and its arrival was kind of a big fucking deal. Rocky runs with it, Bound for Glory floats down a Union rally like a dream, and later The Shining turns the Glide into Dread. Dolby Stereo lifts sound from decoration to architecture, and the needle drops become grammar in Mean Streets and American Graffiti and Saturday Night Fever. And soundtracks finally become identity badges. It's not just downloading Literally Me into you for the next couple months, you're bumping that soundtrack now. Also, this little thing called HBO that launches, and you get the multiplexes, and you have the MPAA ratings. They end up maturing just a little bit. A generation of kids see things that a modern PG audience would never be allowed near. Oh, well, I mean, they could be, but they'd be too busy scrolling an iPad looking at Spider-Man, Cocomelon, fucking deep-fried TikToks, and grow up in the cool kind of strange. Today, the tool stack is cheaper and smarter. You own an editing suite on your laptop, and that is freedom if you use it like a 70s outlaw in a trap if you reverse engineer an algorithm instead of an idea. That applies more to the indie developers using fucking Unreal Engine 5, which I need to talk about in another video. But this freedom runs a sort of tab. Apocalypse Now almost ends its maker. Heaven's Gate arrives just as the decade turns and takes a fucking studio with it, which is another video I need to do. And the leash just snaps. The 80s bring a more certain corporate certainty, and a lot of your Evil Deads and your other RoboCops and your cool 80s like Hell Yeah movies, they have to be in this weird sort of gray zone. This rawness of the 70s starts getting lost. Spielberg and Lucas are artists and engineers, yet their very successes become the case study that risk-averse executives cite for the next 50 years. Trace the bloodlines, The Godfather to The Sopranos to every soulful crime epic that treats sin as inheritance, Taxi Driver to Joker to True Detective to the canon of troubled men who cannot sleep, Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre to the modern horror that boom that keeps the lights on at smaller studios, Close Encounters to tasteful science fiction of awe and dread, and Star Wars and Jaws to every consumerist fucking soy jack Reddit franchise that people fucking glaze until it's not cool to glaze. Then you have the LA Rebellion to today's quiet independent realism, and midnight movies to your favorite cult classics that live online and turns up in theaters like a congregation, and that your older millennial cousin quotes like he's borderline autistic, because he's not borderline, it's straight up autism with him. Conditions rhyme and money feels unstable, streaming looks tired, audiences are restless and cagey about institutions, studios are consolidating, which can either suffocate risk or create one leadership window where there's no healthy competition, where vision matters but just for a season. Paramount just merged with Skydance and flipped the enterprise into a new corporate body with a mandate to compete and to sell. That can mean colder spreadsheets or maybe, hopefully, brief appetite for actual swings, but
Unseathe! My annons! Coop!
Call me Chudda, nothing's ever gonna happen with that. Streamers are pivoting from infinite growth to actual profits because, well, they finally read an economics textbook after the COVID bubble and interest rates rose. Netflix squeezed sharing, they grew a fucking ad tier. Anyways, that's why I sail the 7 seas, and Disney's telling Wall Street a cleaner story on earnings, and Warner Bros. With David Zaslav, I'm not gonna even fucking touch that. There is so much to unpack there, but I'm just gonna throw that suitcase all the way out there. And of course, geopolitics, everyone's favorite fucking psyop. That moves the market. China's volatility matters for slate risk and upside, and Europe funds culture through public mechanisms that shift during war and recession. Look at Ukraine. I mean, their film community is literally making work under bombardment with EU support and festival attention, which tells you what cinema still does best when history gets loud. And of course, you get your little darlings from a certain place mentioned in the Bible that people are still fighting over it. If you say it's a genocide, you lose your fucking career, which is still insane. So here's the spine. The 1970s proved that cinema is not a luxury product, but a spiritual diagnostic tool. The Godfather showed that power is intimate and hereditary, that the nation speaks in the grammar of family. Taxi Driver showed that alienation is not an outlier, but a weather system, and that images don't just record reality, they manufacture it. They etch in the grooves of what we feel collectively. Star Wars showed that Americanized myth still works on a crowded planet, and that technology and commerce are not enemies of wonder, they're just the cover fee to get into the club. Hold those 3 truths together and you get a workable definition of film as a public instrument for private crises. Translate that to the present, consolidated studios and profit-first streamers do not end the possibility of daring work, they shift where it appears and what could happen. Labor safeguards around artificial intelligence don't end the tool set, they set the ethical floor so craft can climb again. Volatile foreign markets don't end global cinema, they just force smarter slates and actually have to make stuff that people want, and by people, I mean me when I'm drunk on Twitter. Horror's dependable margin is not a loophole, but again, you can only throw so much spaghetti at the wall, so to speak, and it's a reminder that form and feeling beat IP in a totally fair fight. The lesson of the 70s isn't just nostalgia, and it's not just that one Tarantino quote that gets passed around, because Tarantino would rather make really stupid fucking takes rather than make a goddamn 10th film already. But hey, that's the process. Small budgets that buy real freedom, specific places that carry moral pressure all by themselves, sound designed as architecture rather than garnish, and stories that treat institutions as characters and characters as institutions in a miniature. A willingness to let ambiguity sit on the table without a fucking lore explanation video that you play on the second tab of YouTube while you play Fortnite or Marvel Rivals. That decade's market was not chaos for its own sake, it was disciplined risk in the face of institutional panic. So here's my thesis. If film is a diagnostic tool, then the job now is the same as it was when the lights went down in 1972. Tell the truth about power, tell the truth about loneliness, make some ironic edits of it, but at the end of the day, tell the truth about why people still line up for this shit in the first place. Do it with craft that respects eyes and ears and time, and do it wherever the oxygen is, where you can light a fire under somebody, whether that is a multiplex and opening night, or you and your friends are just having a Discord movie night of some shit you pirated. the market will follow clarity of intent more reliably than it follows any forced trend. There's only so much bot farms and shilling can do. And when a new wave comes, it will not announce itself, it will look local and necessary, then teach everyone else how to see. The 70s were proof that movies grew teeth when the culture needed them to bite the fuck back. And, well, the culture needs that again. And the rest is courage and work.